Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to this very special lecture by Professor Edgard Gnansounou. We are living in an age of global warming and climate change, and much of the discussions that we have in academic literature as well as in the civil society is engaged with the Anthropocene and how climate change affects the Anthropocene. But the Anthropocene in and of itself is not a homogeneous entity. So there are various forces that compete within the global north and the global south, which in turn affects how energy production is created, distributed, extracted, and ultimately exploited. So I think in this regard, it is very important to understand where do we actually stand vis-a-vis the global north and the global south, and what is the politics behind energy extraction and global warming. So I think in this regard, today's talk will shed some very important light, and I'm very happy to share that we have someone who has worked in these areas across continents, across various disciplines. So on behalf of the Humanities and Social Sciences discipline and IIT Gandhinagar, I welcome you, Professor Edgard, to this talk. So I'll begin with a brief outline of the talk, and after that, Sukanya will be introducing our speaker. Energy security is a core theme in the scientific literature devoted to energy, whether it concerns questions of a geopolitical nature regarding the securing of the energy supply or the design of a country's energy policy and its monitoring. Energy security is often claimed for justifying or opposing energy strategies. In international literature, this theme prioritizes the industrialized countries because of the greater sensitivity of their economy to the availability of energy and its accessibility. The search by the industrialized countries for energy resources are available and accessible throughout the world, and is part of what is known as an autocentrist conception that grants little place to the consequences in the supplier countries and beyond to the broader ecological state of this planet. The abandonment of fossil fuels necessary to achieve climate neutrality can only be effective if it takes place on the whole planet, which seems unlikely by the goal year of 2050 for multiple reasons. Limiting this objective to certain industrialized countries would proceed from the virtuous self-centeredness as opposed to the predatory insatiety. The focus in industrialized countries of the concept of energy security inevitably leads to autocentric deadlock. It is thereby necessary to change the paradigm and consider the contribution of advanced economies to the rest of the world to reduce the share of fossil fuels in their energy mix, not as a generous aid, but as the essential compensation for an assumed responsibility in the wider process of climate change. This responsibility is inherited from the historical process of the Industrial Revolution. The degree of the ecological responsibility should vary from one country to another, and far from being guilty, ecological security must reflect the global nature of climate change, which imposes upon us a fair share of the mitigation costs. The energy transition will be planetary or it will be not. It will happen at a speed that will be imposed upon the powerful countries by the rest of the world if the advanced economies do not make it their business. So it's pretty heavy what we are dealing with in today's lecture. So on that note, I invite Sukanya to introduce our esteemed speaker.
Thank you, Professor Ashish. So with that, I'll be introducing Professor Edgard to you all, although he does not need introduction. Professor Edgard Gnansounou is the former head of the Bioenergy and Energy Planning Research Group at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, Lausanne, Switzerland. He obtained his civil engineering degree at EPFL in 1983. then his PhD in 1991, with a thesis in the field of energy planning. He worked in the Laboratory of Energy Systems from 1983 to 2003 before taking over its management until 2009. The LAZEN, which has become the Bioenergy and Energy Planning Unit, is active in the large-scale integration of renewables into existing systems, which is dominated by fossil fuels. He was the head of this unit until his retirement. He has also led several multidisciplinary projects in Europe, Latin America, Asia, and Africa. His research has focused more specifically on three methodological topics, namely the allocation of resources and emissions in the context of life cycle analysis, sustainability compliance assessment for products and systems, energy security. In each of these areas, Professor Gnansounou has developed innovative assessment methods. His teaching is problem-based learning applied to the development and multi-criteria evaluation of energy strategies in an uncertain future and in multi-actors contexts. He has taught courses in the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral school cycles. Apart from his academic endeavors, he has developed decision support tools for energy planning. He has taught courses in the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral school cycles. Apart from his academic endeavors, he has developed decision support tools for energy planning, the best known of which is Planelco Pro for planning the long-term expansion of electricity generating systems. He has also contributed to territorial energy planning with the particular point of finding a trade-off between centralized, decentralized, and distributed energy generation. Professor Edgard is the author or co-author of about 180 scientific papers, co-editor of 9 scientific books, and the author of 2 books on Africa. He is a reviewer of more than 20 scientific journals, a member of the editorial board of Bioresource Technology, and is associate editor of Energy Strategy Reviews, both published by Elsevier. He is currently a scholar in residence in the electrical engineering discipline at IIT Gandhinagar. With that, I'll give the stage to Professor Edgard.
Thank you very much for your kind, very kind introduction. So I'm very happy to be here and to have an exchange with you on the subject of our seminar this afternoon, energy security faced to climate change, between autocentrism, deadlock, and global fairness. I will start my presentation with a short story. A short story that is the story between a young girl whose name is Asiba and her father. Asiba asked to her father, "Show me, Daddy, the way for a fair future." And her father answered, "You will discover this way with your neighbors, so together with your neighbors." And Asiba to her father, "Dad, who should be my neighbors for a fair future?" And the dad answered, "I see. Your neighbors will be worms, will be wind, earth, Mother Nature, the world, the universe, and all this into yourself." I see. What is the link, what is the relation between this short story, somewhere in Africa, and the subject of our seminar this afternoon? It is the fair future. What is the fairness? And the fairness will be linked to our relation with others our relation with our environment, not immediate environment, but also far environment. So my talk will follow this plan. First, I will discuss about energy security. I will make some elaboration on this subject and continue with a critical discussion and propose that energy security should be conceptualized today within an ecological security. I will briefly mention some cases and finish with some proposition about global fairness. My discourse will be really oriented around the proposition of a solution of a problem. What is this problem? It is the problem of energy security in a new environment that is an environment that is dominated by sustainability. So the starting point of my discourse is a paper that I have written in 2008. This paper was the result of my involvement within a working group of the World Energy Council, chapter of Europe, and I have proposed for 37 countries of OECD, that is industrialized countries. I have proposed a method that is based on indicators in five areas. The first is primary energy intensity of gross domestic product. The second is energy import dependency. The ratio of energy-based CO2 emissions to the total primary energy supply, the electricity supply vulnerability, and also the non-diversity of oil for transportation. So based on, for each area, I have developed indicators and aggregate these indicators for the area and propose a totally aggregated indicators. And this indicator was used to rate and to rank the 37 countries. And I found that Canada was the less vulnerable. And you can see the country that came at the end. Okay, so my discussion about this work will be to have a distance and try to make a critical analysis in the new context that you have today. But before this discussion, some facts. The first is that from the first energy crisis in 1973-74 to the present period, the picture of energy scene has changed dramatically. On the left, you can see the energy mix, the total primary supply of the world, and you can see the share of oil that was high, about 62%. You see that compared to year 2019, the share has decreased dramatically, and oil was partially replaced by natural gas, a little by nuclear energy. And what is also remarkable is the distribution of energy supply between the different blocks. The block of industrialized countries, which share was very high in 1973, and that has been that is now about 37%. And you can see the role today, the increase of the share of Asian countries, and remarkably, the role of China, also India. So that is the new picture. Between these 2 years, the total primary energy supply have been multiplied by about 2.5, so that is considerable. Another very important point, even in the energy mix, the share of oil has decreased. Oil continues to play an important role. And you can see in this picture that the origin of transaction of oil worldwide, these origins are very concentrated in Middle East, now also in USA, and in other countries like Russia. Okay, so 2 things. A big concentration of the origin, but also a change. The change is the new role of USA. USA is the first oil producer in the world today, and this has changed geopolitical issues. You can see that, for example, the role of US in the Middle East has changed. So oil continue to play a strategic role, but in a new framework. Now, what about climate change? Climate change is not only a constraint, it is a framework that that is very important when we speak about energy. What is the situation today? Last year, the average temperature of the Earth was estimated 1.2 degrees above the temperature during the industrialized the start of industrialization period. So it is situated to the year 1850. So 1.2 degrees Celsius above that temperature. The objective, in order to contain the warming, the global warming, the objective is to maintain this temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius at the end of the millenary, so at the year 2100. So scientists, most of scientists consider that the origin of this situation is anthropogenic emission of greenhouse gas. So what is the magnitude of this emission? It is between 50 and 60 billion tons of CO2 equivalent per year. In 2019, it was about 60. So what is the role in that emissions of energy? The share, the responsibility of energy is accounted to about 73%. When I speak about energy, it is the whole value chain of energy, from extraction to end use of energy. So the objective is to achieve a near zero CO2 energy derived, to achieve a near zero by year 2050. So the problem today is that this requires high amount of investment. The investment is estimated to 3 to 4 trillion US dollar per year up to year 2030. And in the recent year, the investment was about 1 trillion US dollar per year. So that is a real problem to have a mobilization, to mobilize the amount required for decarbonizing the energy systems of today. So now I will briefly discuss about these different areas, the 5 different areas. The first is energy intensity. What is energy intensity? Energy intensity is a ratio between total primary energy consumption and the GDP at the level of one country, one region, etc. So, what are the key factors that can influence the evolution of these indicators? First, you have to notice that it is a ratio. So, its evolution will depend on the evolution of the numerator and the denominator. So, if, for example, the denominator increase rapidly compared to the numerator, the ratio will decrease. So that is one of the effects. Energy intensity depends also on structural change of the economy. If you have an economy that is dominated by industry, you will have a tendency of high level of energy intensity. If it is dominated by agriculture or tertiary sector, the energy intensity will be lower. So that is a key factor also. For advanced economies, so that is the name now that is used by IEA to design the industrialized countries. For advanced economies, we have also one important factor, that is the relocation of industries from these countries to emergent countries like China, India also, Brazil, and so on. So that has contributed to lower energy intensity of these countries. So that means that the decrease of energy intensity is not only an evidence of soberness, more efficient energy systems. It could play a role, but it is not the only factor. The second area is energy import dependency. Energy import dependency is used by most countries as one important indicator of the self-sufficiency in energy. So in the model I have proposed, I focus on oil, natural gas, mainly. You know the role of oil. You know also that the price of oil is very volatile. Natural gas also play an important role. So the market of the coal is more a regional market. So the evolution of this depends on the countries, but all the countries try to be more self-sufficiency and to import less. CO2 intensity. CO2 intensity depends mainly on which energy mix is characterized the power sector. Power sectors that use coal will tend to have a high CO2 intensity. But we have also to consider fuel for transportation. Transportation is an important sector, an energy sector, and transportation today is dominated all over the world by petroleum, by oil. So these two sectors play an important role on this indicator. Now, if we introduce renewable, natural gas is also introduced as a transitional fuel that can influence the evolution of this indicator. So electricity supply, the issue here is the diversity of the mix of energy used in electricity supply. When we think about the role of electricity supply in vulnerability of energy system, we have to think also about the investment on the infrastructure. We have to think about demand side management in order to master better the evolution of the demand. In the world, combined cycle power plant using natural gas play a role of for replacing coal and oil, and so very, very important. You have the solar and wind energy, which role is increasing in recent years. Now, transportation is one sector that is difficult to change from energy point of view. In most of the countries, the road transportation is the most important. And within road transportation, we have private transportation. So in Europe, for example, private transportation was dominated by diesel. So to change the energy mix of this transport is very challenging. But alternatives are electrification of transportation, introduction of hydrogen also, but also urban planning, trying to influence the distances, the mobility. Okay, so that some comments on these indicators, and I think that the indicators are relevant when thinking about the energy security of a country. But now, a critical discussion. First, in favor of this model, we can agree that each government must care about energy security of his country, of his economy, because an economy that is insecure from energy supply point of view cannot work in a good way, because there will be a loss of opportunities, so loss of wealth creation. So energy security is a prerequisite for any social and economic development. Now, there are some weaknesses that I want to point out. That is that energy security has been used to justify several exaggerations. So to try to develop fossil fuels everywhere in the world, independently to the consequence in the countries. So this way of doing is not ethically acceptable. So we have also a very important point that is called the leakage effect. The leakage effect is that in the case of these 37 countries, the case of industrialized countries, there was a phenomenon of deindustrialization that was due to the relocation to other countries. I have discussed already about that. So what we have noticed is that there is more and more import of goods that are intensive in energy from these countries to industrialized countries, and the carbon content of these goods is not accounted when we try to estimate the emissions of greenhouse gas of the different countries. The principle that is used, accounting method that is used, is what is called a production-based method. That means that the emission that are considered is the emission in the territory. It is a territorial conception. If I come in India and I invest to produce a good using the coal, and if I export all of these goods in Switzerland to meet a demand of these goods, in accounting of greenhouse gas, this accounting will be considered that the emissions are in India, and Switzerland will have any responsibility in these emissions. So it is a production based accounting. So in that case, we can conclude that it is not so fair. Okay. What I call the predatory autocentrism is the fact that in the scientific literature, the issue of energy security was mainly about industrialized countries. That can be understood because for these countries to have energy, reliable energy is very important for the economy. So that is why it is important for them to find energy, primary energy everywhere in the world, and if possible, elsewhere in other planets, if it was possible. So this predatory autocentrism cannot continue to be accepted. So it is very good that now we have another autocentrism, that is what I call a virtuous autocentrism. A virtuous autocentrism is that these countries today try to achieve a net neutral by 2050. That is good. That is good, but it is not enough. It is not enough because it is important to think about their responsibility in the historical emission of greenhouse gas. This responsibility must be discussed. It must be discussed because it is not the responsibility of the present generation. So it will not be fair to say that the present generation of these countries must pay totally for this. But it is important to consider this responsibility. We have, in the framework of this virtual autocentrism, we have a weakness. That weakness is international trade effect. What is this effect? Let's assume that the advanced economy achieves this objective of CO2 neutral. So there is no assurance that other countries will follow. And if we have an international trade, if they import products, goods from these countries, and if the greenhouse gas emissions are accounted in a fair way, we cannot consider that they really achieve neutrality, because will be included in the goods we will import, there will be also emission of greenhouse gas. So from that evidence comes the question: should these countries protect the borders against products from other countries in order to continue to be virtuous. So that question leads to what we can call a danger of world divide. World divide between the virtual countries who try to decrease the emission of greenhouse gas, who try to achieve neutrality, climate neutrality, and others. I don't think it is ethically acceptable. We have also other effects, what is called the intertemporal effect. The intertemporal effect is that when we think about greenhouse gas emission, we often make a mistake. This mistake is that we consider that these emissions are like a stock. And if some countries decrease their emissions, the total emission, the global emission will also decrease. That is not the reality. Today, industrialized countries are decreasing the emission of greenhouse gas, but the global emission is increasing. We consider also generally that, fossil fuels, the price of fossil fuels will increase in the future. That is a scenario, but it is not the only scenario. If the industrialized countries decrease their consumption, if they ban, for example, fossil fuels, the demand, the total demand in the first period, the total demand will decrease. If the total demand decreases, for the same supply, the price will tend to decrease. If the price decreases in a second period, it can encourage more use of fossil fuels in other countries. So that is what is called an intertemporal effect. We have also the issue of international growth gap between the advanced economy, in which the economic growth is low, and in other countries, for example, in the emerging countries, where it is higher. So the advanced economies would like to capture part of this economic growth. So if they put barriers around their territory because of the difference of greenhouse gas intensity, so I'm not sure that other countries will accept them in the international market. So due to these factors, we can consider that the virtuous autocentrism is also a deadlock. It is a deadlock, and it is there is a need of another way of thinking, and a need of a global ecological governance. Why this? Because global warming is a global phenomenon. So it is not possible to solve this problem by being in the previous paradigm with the boundary, the national boundaries. It is necessary, the nations must play an important role, but it is also important to have an international governance. For this need of the concept of ecological security, within my research, I have proposed a new paradigm of sustainability. The conventional paradigm of sustainability is the three pillars: economy, social, and environment. And sustainability is the intersection of these three pillars. In reality, we can notice that economy plays the major role. And the conventional paradigm can be used for the transition. Why? Because according to the orthodoxy, according to the conventional economy, climate change, for example, is a failure, is a market failure. So we cannot drive the transition using the conventional paradigm of economy. So that is why, after others, I consider that a new paradigm should put economy inside social and social inside the environment. So in this paradigm, the complementary of economy must become green, and the complementary of economy should be so sober well-being. So for the same well-being level, it is not necessary to use the same amount of natural resource like the industrialized countries. And the complementary of social in the environment should be ecology. So that is this paradigm. And from this paradigm, I have developed a tool that is named the logic-based model, that is a rule-based, so a knowledge-based, that is used to rate product and system from the point of view of sustainability. Is the product is sustainable, very sustainable, not sustainable, etc. So I will not insist on this concept, but in the concept, sustainability is explained by two determinants, ecology and social. So these determinants are explained by direct indicators, and these indicators at their turn as explained by other indicators. What I can say is that the present method that use voluntary mechanism is not efficient, but not enough. So it is important to use global governance in order to be efficient. Okay. So now the important question of responsibility. This slide shows the territorial based responsibility of different regions in the world. And you can see that North America has the higher responsibility, followed by Europe and other countries, but Russia, etc. The question is, what should we consider? Should we consider the total emission of greenhouse gas or the emission per capita? You can see here the situation of fewer emitters. You can see that for the absolute value, China is the first emitters, followed by USA and India, Europe at the same level. But when we go to emission per capita, you see that USA is the first, followed by Russian and China, and you can see that the place of India is lower, very low. From my point of view, we have to consider both. You have to consider the emission per capita, but also the global emissions. Now, the case of India. You can see that India is already the most populous countries. So that is very important. That means that the evolution of energy system of India is not important just for India, but also for the world. You see that coal continues to play an important role in India, despite the willingness of the authorities and the economy to substitute coal. But we have to consider economic factors that is a constraint to the real implementation of these policies. That explain that, for example, India has not committed for national determined target of reduction of CO2. There is no date of peak emissions in India, and this can be explained by this slide. You can see that the emission of CO2 in India is less than 40% of the average of the world. You can see other indicators. These indicators show that energy consumption will continue to increase in India as a result of meeting the demand of the peoples, meeting the demand of the economy. You see here the structure of a balance, energy balance of India, with the important role played by coal energy. And coal is used mainly in power generation. You see here that power generation is dominated by coal. And you see that industry is here dominated by petroleum, but also use coal. And you can see something very important is the small sector, the small emitter, that is the buildings categories. And within the building categories, you can see the residential. The residential here is low. If I compare to the case of European Union, the role of residential in Europe, for example, has the same magnitude compared to other sectors. That is not the case in India. That means that the situation will change in the future, and the share of residential will increase. Now, I come to the case of Africa. You see here, for different sub-regions of Africa, the evolution of energy mix, and especially we see, you can see the situation of sub-Saharan Africa, where in the reference year, it is dominated by traditional fuel. The scheme here is very optimistic. It is to replace the traditional fuels by new renewable by year 2030. I don't think it will be realized. It is too optimistic. So Africa has to respond to several challenges. So you see here for different sub-regions of Africa, and mainly for sub-Saharan Africa, you see the situation, the challenges with about 600 million people who has not access to electricity. You see also the situation concerning cooking fuel. Cooking fuel depends from 970 million depend on traditional fuel. So the priority in Africa and in sub-Saharan Africa is to find transitional solution to these problems. So this transitional solution will imply continue using fossil fuels. So another aspect is the dependency of some economies in sub-Saharan Africa, the dependency on export of mineral resources. So Africa, the economy in most of African countries is export of goods that has, how to say, so a low a low value added. So this situation is a vulnerable situation because you can see here that for the case of oil, for example, the price is very volatile. If the price at the international market increases, some countries can see their revenues also increases. If it is not the case, that is a very difficult situation. So that is one way to characterize this situation. The second way, another way to characterize this situation is that Africa has been considered as a kind of deposit of minerals for other regions. And this situation will, for sure, will change in the future because the youth is conscientious about this situation. And there is today in Africa the wish to develop also regional value chains, not to be autarchical, but to use part of the mineral resources for the development in Africa. That is not the case today. So I come to the last part of my contribution this afternoon is global fairness. What could be global fairness? The global fairness is the fact that in the majority of countries in the world, there are a large part of the population who must achieve a certain level of capabilities. For that, it will be necessary to use energy. So these countries will use, most probably, will use the less costly, the less expensive energy. If it is fossil energy, it will not be the consequence of the willingness to remain on fossil fuels. It will be the consequence to offer some capabilities to the peoples who has not access to electricity, the people who has not access to sanitation, the people who has not access to education, to health. So that is a priority. A global fairness is that this priority should not be only the priority of these countries. It could be a global priority. So for that, I propose to my concept of global fairness, I propose 7 principles. The first principle is to abandon the production base accounting of greenhouse gas and to develop a hybrid approach that will consider production but also consumption. So that is to allocate the emission of greenhouse gas depending on the benefit of the different parties. So the producing countries has a benefit, but also the import countries. So the second principle is that industrialization worldwide has produced wealth, material wealth, and also opportunities for material wealth. So these opportunities are not taken in homogeneous way by all of the population of the world. So a fairness is that people who can profit more for these opportunities should also contribute more to the externalities of the industrialization. And within these externalities, we have the global warming. So, to continue, the third is that it is necessary to agree worldwide about a set of capabilities that each human must be endowed in a few decades. And this set of capabilities must be financed. So that is the fourth principle, the decarbonizing of the transition to make possible to achieve this set of capabilities must be financed by the peoples that has more revenues, not only in certain countries, but everywhere. In every countries, you can find people who are rich, people who are less rich. So this principle is that each government, that is principle number 5, each government must collect levies from this category of people, but also from industry. The revenue of this levy must be transferred to an international agency, and this international agency will allocate this fund to the project, to projects that has more impact globally. That means that presently, if you analyze the allocation of the different funds, you can see that in G7 countries, that is the most rich countries, the 95% of the amount that are collected are used in these countries. But what is notable is that the marginal cost of reduction of emission of greenhouse gas, this marginal cost is lower elsewhere. It is lower in other countries. If you invest the same money in these countries, the quantity of reduction of greenhouse gas will be lower compared to investment of the same money in other countries like India, like China, like Africa. The case of Africa is a bit different because Africa is very fragmented in small countries, except a country like Nigeria, who has a critical mass. So, for the global interest, and climate change is a global phenomenon, we should collect money from everywhere and use this money in a competitive way, taking into account the impact, the real impact on reduction of CO2 emission, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So that is the principle of fairness that I propose in this lecture. That could be, it is discussable, but I think it is very important if the objective is really to decrease globally the emission of greenhouse gas in the world. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very keen to learn about your question and try to answer them. Thank you.